We're going to turn our attention now to education policy on the national level. Our guest now on the phone is Arthur Lieber. He has more than 40 years in education, including teaching public and private schools throughout the St. Louis area. In 1974, he co-founded the Crossroads School, and now still the only non-sectarian independent secondary school in the city of St. Louis. In 1989, he co-founded a nonprofit called Civitas, which encourages students to become self-learners, motivated by their curiosity rather than by the pressure of tests and papers. Also has written a book called An Unlikely Candidate, Reflections on My Run for Congress, which is available through Amazon.com. And he's here this morning to talk about education policy, including the No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top initiatives. And Arthur, welcome to the Morning Magazine.
Doug, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, this is a hot topic on everybody's mind, education testing, education funding. And of course, it's near and dear to anybody's heart who has children in a public or private school setting. So first of all, if you would, give us a little perspective, a little background, kind of, I guess, maybe some 2020 hindsight on the No Child Left Behind. Has it achieved what was the original intent of that law?
You know, that's a difficult question to answer because it's a case where the goalposts have been moved repeatedly. No Child Left Behind was designed to look for different levels of test scores in school districts, particular schools, even in certain classrooms. And states were left with the responsibility of determining exactly what the criteria would be, what the testing would be. And the goal was that there would be no child left behind by the year 2014. Well, that isn't going to happen. It never really appeared to be the case, but states have scrambled to try and make it look that way. So it's kind of led to a whole series of cheating incidents, which really means that we've learned very little from it.
All right. So was it the intent was flawed or just the implementation of this program?
I think it was set up to fail. I think that, I'm reminded of what we've all heard recently about Lance Armstrong and the Tour de France, that the nature of the competition there and the testing is such that people are going to try to game the system. And I think from the get-go, that's the way No Child Left Behind was set up. And, it was for the benefit, presumably, of school administrators and teachers looking good. There are very few references in it to the individual child, and isn't that what education's all about?
Well, you would normally think so, yes. Now, the president has come up, President Obama, with his Race to the Top initiative to perhaps address some of these shortcomings in No Child Left Behind. Should we just go ahead and try to salvage No Child Left Behind, or should we scrap it and go on to something like Race to the Top, or option number 3, whatever that might be?
Well, Race to the Top is in many ways like No Child Left Behind, except it compares different states' scores and allocates a certain amount of federal money based on how the students do on standardized tests. But I really think that we are so test-driven and kids have become so monolithic that we need to get away from the test. I mean, we have situations, for instance, where students don't know who the president was during the Civil War, but they have some idea how to eliminate answer options on multiple choice tests. We tend to like to measure data, and with education, you can do that. You're measuring it, but is it meaningful? I don't think so. Is that how we want children to develop? I think we want children who are critical thinkers, who are concerned about fellow citizens, who know how to function in an active democracy, and none of that is part of either No Child Left Behind or Race to the Top.
Bill, you have a question?
Arthur, we hear this criticism that teachers now just teach to the test as opposed to educating our children. And if that's the case, how do you monitor whether our children are being taught, both the basic skills and, how to be, a citizen in a democratic society?
I think that what we really want to look for is when a student graduates, do they have the skills to function in that society? Do they have job skills? And, if you are teaching so that students learn, they are going to learn. There certainly is going to be testing within the classroom. Math teachers are going to know how well students are doing. They're going to, rather than trying to help a student better understand what's on the test, they can work with a student to try to better understand the areas in which he or she might be weak. So I think we need a form of evaluation, but the way in which it was done 50 or 60 years ago worked for a lot of people, and that was prior to having big education bureaucracies and the unions being so strong in ways that may be unrelated to their basic interests in terms of salary and working conditions. So I think we can have a lot of accountability. We just don't need to turn it over to the federal government or to the states.
We're talking with Arthur Lieber. He is an education expert and consultant talking about national policy. Arthur, do the institutions of higher learning, the universities and colleges, have any culpability in this? Because many students are saying, I need to do what's necessary in order to go to the next step, which is to get accepted ideally into my school of choice or choice number 2. And so I'm just going to spit out as many facts and figures as I can in order to get as high a grade as I can, a high GPA, so I can get into my school. Or should the colleges and universities be dictating a little bit more to the high schools and middle schools? Here's the kind of skills that we need the students to have, because I hear lots of stories about how many almost functionally illiterate students are applying for college applications these days.
Right. I think that's a real problem. And as you mentioned in the introduction, I was involved in starting an independent school, Crossroads School. And our philosophy towards college admissions was this: look, we're going to do our best to prepare students, to have them be good learners. And you know what? If the colleges were like a sports team and they were holding a draft, the students from our school in all likelihood would be high draft choices, because they have a desire to learn for the most part, and they're pretty skilled. And that's what happened. The colleges came looking for the talent. I think right now you've got high schools which are just begging, pleading, just demeaning themselves and the students, particularly the way they package the students to the colleges. So you have no idea what's real and what's not. I mean, if you look at a student's transcript, you may see 8 or 10 extracurricular activities. They don't have time to do all of that. They're taking, AP courses on steroids. What does that mean? Does it mean anything more than what we learned when the courses went by different names? I don't think so. So I think that the goal should be to try and provide opportunities for students to learn, regardless of how you label it, and then teach. And then colleges can learn to a certain extent from grades and from college admissions tests, and I think most importantly from interviews.
A lot of controversy in this part of the country, in Pennsylvania in particular, about charter schools. And the idea was that you would take students who maybe struggled in a traditional classroom setting, in a public school in particular, and to set up a charter school that might emphasize maybe the hard sciences. And you have another charter school that emphasizes arts and languages and different things. Was that a misguided effort, or is there a place for charter schools in education?
I think there's definitely a place for charter schools, but I think that they will function better when there's less control by the central school district. Generally, charter schools have to operate within very similar parameters to public schools. And an example would be that the teachers need to be certified in a particular area. Again, from my own personal experience, there was no correlation whatsoever in terms of whether a teacher was certified in an area and how well they could teach in that area. So I think that charter schools have legs. I think that the testing results from them to this point are undecided. But again, I don't place much stock in the testing, because it's really hard, to have comparable groups of students who you're testing. I think we ought to pursue it further, but we ought to give the people who run the schools, A, more autonomy in what they're doing, and B, I think we need to outlaw the idea of them being for profit, because that has just really been destructive to the whole charter school movement.
Well, I'm sorry, Arthur, particularly in elementary school, and I guess all the way up through high school, the other component that's often missing is parental support or encouragement or involvement. Government can't be the nanny, but what can be done to encourage parents to be more involved in their child's education? I think that's one area where statistics will show children that get support from home tend to do better in school than those who don't.
I think you're right, and I think that this is, though, not monolithic. I think that some parents are extremely supportive to the students and to the schools and know how to work collaboratively. And then there are other parents who, quite frankly, are the source of a lot of the kids' problems. And so if you have a policy of we're going to have tight relations with all parents, you're going to put a lot more kids at risk because, again, from experience, I think in a lot of cases, the best thing you can do for the student is try to have people within the school work as role models, set examples, set expectations, and if you bring the parents in, then all kinds of peripheral issues, which are lifelong, get brought in and often are destructive to the kids. So I think wherever possible, obviously you want to have the parents involved. But we all know there are plenty of people out there parenting who are not particularly helpful to their students.
We're talking with Arthur Lieber, and he's an education consultant and has worked in education for more than 40 years. And Arthur, unfortunately, we're coming to a deadline here, a hard stop. But tell us a little bit about your organization, Civitas, and your mission there.
We work with students to get them out into the community, to have them become active citizens. We have a program next week, for instance, called Urban Go Team, and we'll start off with a bird's eye view of St. Louis from a tall building and looking at our community, and not just, well, here's this building, here's that historic house. Look at all that land where there have been tax breaks so that the developer could come in for better or for worse. Look at where projects have been on the drawing boards for 20 years and things like that haven't happened. We get kids out on the street polling. We have them going into businesses, asking business owners about how their operation works, what their challenges are. So what we like to do is to get kids out on the streets into the community, and that's part of learning about your world today.
And the final question, we didn't have a chance much to talk about your book, and unlike the candidate, you ran for the 2nd Congressional District in Missouri. What did you learn about going through that experience? Maybe that surprised you a bit.
I was surprised at how both the Democratic Party and the media took minimal interest in the idea of somebody running who, A, was not a professional politician, and B, who was not accepting contributions. I thought that even though the chances of me winning were very slim, that I was doing something different and hopefully could be beneficial to our political process. And I wasn't intending on writing a book, but I did after, recognizing that through the course of the campaign I had perhaps reached some people, but not that many. And I think it's going to take a generation or more to really reform our political process, and I just wanted to get this out into our body of knowledge.
Arthur, appreciate you joining us this morning. The debate will continue, I'm sure.
Well, I really appreciate it, Doug. Thanks for the opportunity.
You bet. Arthur Lieber, again, education consultant and very experienced in the national debate on education.